I went behind Soldano's back to bring you the truth. The Soldano SLO100, the original high-gain amplifier. Worshipped by amp snobs everywhere like it was personally handed down from Mount Tube by Saint Mike himself. Yeah, it really does sound amazing, even when you do your entire mix with just free plugins. And at $4,000, it had better sound amazing. But what if you're somebody who actually plays guitar and works for a living, and you don't want to be enslaved to a credit card company for the next decade? Well, I just found a way to get the same sound from a real tube amp that cost me less than $300. Let me show you how to find one and how it stacks up against the real thing, because you just heard both of them. Did you even notice? Hi, I'm Glenn Fricker, and I love showing you how to get killer guitar sounds without going broke. Because when I first started making records way back in 1998, I've learned a few inconvenient facts about recording the electric guitar. Number one, the speaker is the single most important part of the signal chain. Because every sound you make, your pickups, your pedals, your $4,000 boutique amp, all of it gets filtered by that speaker. And if you're using some cheap-ass buzzy piece of shit, then even the best pickups in the world are still gonna sound like a wet fart through a bullhorn. It doesn't matter how much you paid for them. Number two, guitar players love making wild claims about tone. You've seen it a million times. Dude, the germanium rectifier in this boutique tube amp makes the mids bloom with natural harmonic resonance. Cool story, bro! Where's your A/B recording? Oh right, you don't have one, because you're full of shit! And number three, amp companies rip each other off constantly, and nobody ever gets sued. Why? Because the dirty little secret of guitar amps is that they're all using the same basic circuit. I know, I'm probably gonna get flayed alive by the Boutique Amp Builders Association for saying this, but guess what? I don't work for them. I work for you. So here's the truth. Leo Fender, not some mythical amp design genius. He pulled this design straight out of the RCA Receiving Tube Manual, a book written to help RCA sell more vacuum tubes. And it's still available for free up on the Internet Archive. And everybody else, they just copied the same public domain circuit. Sure, some companies swapped tubes, added a master volume, maybe some extra bells and whistles, but at the core, it's the same goddamn layout over and over and over again. Now, don't misquote me here. I am not saying that all amps sound identical. What I am saying is there is a common ancestry, a shared DNA. And once you understand that, dialing in your tone becomes a whole lot easier. And this has allowed me to get some truly killer results from dirt cheap tube combo amps that most collectors wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. 6505 plus combo, 60 watts of face melting awesomeness. The Valve King combo sounds way closer to a Soldano than most people are willing to admit. Just run it through a good speaker, because again, it's not the amp doing the filtering. And even the Bugera 1960 Infinium, the amp everybody loves to sneer at because it was made by Behringer, is a total fucking monster if you're chasing after that plexi grind. If you want Van Halen one-style crunch on a budget, that will do the job. And all of these amps are dirt cheap on the used market. And most importantly, they can go head to head with far more expensive boutique options if you know what you're doing and you use your ears instead of your eyes. And I'm not just blowing smoke out of my ass. I actually did the A/B recordings. I did the frequency response graphs. I listened, I tested, I measured. Because unlike most guitar players, I live by the words, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. Not marketing hype, not mojo, and definitely not stories on a forum somewhere with zero corroborating evidence. I love doing this series because I wish it had existed when I was learning how to record, because it would have saved me thousands. Instead, I blew a stupid amount of money over the decades chasing gear that didn't actually get me the result that I wanted. But my loss is your gain, because I'm always hunting for old, underrated amps that punch way above their price point. Now, it's no secret that I'm not really a big fan of Line 6. This is the company that promised the world and delivered disappointment after disappointment. The Spider 5? That's possibly one of the worst sounding amps ever conceived. Right out of the box, it was absolute shit. So I gave it the treatment it deserved, the hammer of truth. And that's the thing about the Spider series, they all sucked. And it drove me insane when clients would bring them into the studio, insisting that I record them to capture their sound. Now, Line 6 did make a few improvements with the Spider 5 Mark II, but then they went right back to sniffing glue with the Catalyst. Honestly, I don't know what the fuck they're thinking half the time over there. But somewhere in that titanic dung heap of old Line 6 products, there's a gem. Something actually worth your attention, something worth digging up and giving a fair shot. And that's the Spider Valve Mark II. And not because of the Line 6 part, crom no, but because the power section was designed by Bogner. Actually, let me rephrase that. The power section was designed by RCA and tweaked by Bogner. I was fortunate enough to be a guest at Ulrich Wild's studio one day. You know, the guy who's worked on Pantera, Deftones, Deathclock, basically the soundtrack to your teenage years if you had anger issues and an iPod. He's inspired more than a few episodes on the show because, unlike a lot of people on the internet, he actually knows what he's talking about and can back his shit up. So I'm poking around his amp collection and what I see buried in the corner? A Line 6 Spider Valve Mark II, and I'm like, okay, what the hell is this doing here? And his response, and I'm paraphrasing here because it was a few years back. Actually, it's kind of cool. You can find a use for almost any piece of gear. And honestly, that line still haunts me to this day. He's saved more gear from the hammer of truth than I'd care to admit because I keep hearing him repeat that phrase in my head. What use can this actually be? Except, of course, for the Aeroband guitar. There's no salvation for that piece of trash. Yeah, my hip's still sore from that little stunt. Worth it though. Now look, I get it. For a lot of you watching, the Soldano SLO 100 is about as attainable as a down payment on a house anywhere in Canada. The economy's in the toilet, your job's going to be replaced by AI, and you're sitting there wondering if you're ever going to be able to afford groceries. Never mind a boutique amp that costs $4,000. And trust me, I know what it's like to work your ass off for gear. I did 27 years on the line at Chrysler. That job sucked on a daily basis. And you know what made it worse? Dropping my hard-earned cash on some overhyped piece of crap because some forum dipshit said it was life-changing, but couldn't be bothered to post even one recording as proof. So I made it my mission to find real solutions to get great tone for cheap. No fluff, no snake oil, no mojo bullshit. And in this case, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the solution starts with the Spider Valve Mark II. Ugh. Now, here's what they were probably thinking. Take Line 6's world-famous fried assholes digital modeling, bolt it onto a real tube power section, and pray to crime that it makes a difference. And you know what? Those things were popular because they sold by the truckload, which means you can pick one up now for about the price of dinner for two at Applebee's. Here's a 40-watt combo for $200. Here's a 100-watt head for $395. But here's the catch. Those combos are loaded with speakers that created the fried asshole sound. And since most guitar players have the critical thinking skills of a potato, they plug it in, hate what they hear, and immediately blame the amp instead of the $5 speaker that it came with. Meanwhile, if you plug that same combo into a halfway decent cabinet, like say a Harley Benton vertical 2x12, suddenly it's like, whoa, that actually sounds great. And yet you sit there wondering why most rock bands fail. But of course, there are scammers and dreamers out there. Here's a combo listed at $1,400. Get fucked. Here's a head for $1,742. I don't know what planet this guy lives on, but I'm guessing it's got a severe lead paint problem. Now, what I found here was a 40-watt combo that somebody converted into a head. Pretty clever, actually. I did the exact same thing with the 6505 combo a couple years ago. Now this here is the amp that UPS misplaced and magically found again once I made a video about it disappearing. It's weird how that works, huh? So once you plug it into a cab loaded with good speakers, it's not bad. It's definitely a massive upgrade from the original Spider 5, which sounded like a dial-up modem being strangled by bees, but let's not kid ourselves. This thing still has that classic 2010 era Line 6 digital shittiness. The metal model, probably the only thing worth using. Insane setting? Yeah. Oh, please don't use it. Look, back in 2009, digital modeling tech was, let's call it, aspirational. Sure, the Axe Effects was pretty good, but was also $2,000 back then. And for that money, you could get a used 5150 that would curb stomp it in a real mix. But most players wound up with the Line 6 stuff because, hey, why settle for one usable tone when you can have 256 terrible ones instead?
But Glenn, you said you could make it sound like a Soldano.
Yes, I did, and it took some digging. But there's actually one thing that gives this amp a fighting chance. It's got an effects loop. This right here is why we're even doing this video, because the effects loop on the Spider Valve gives us direct access to that glorious 40-watt all-tube power section. We're bypassing all the Line 6 digital garbage and just using the Bogner part of the amp, or more accurately, the RCA part. Because let's be real here, even with all the knob twisting in the world, this thing had never really sounded like a Soldano. Not even close. But amp modeling tech has come a long way since 2009. We've gone from the digital turds of the Line 6 front end to Neural Amp Modeler, a free plugin that lets you clone just about anything. And when you combine that with a $79 pedal from Veilton called the GP5, you've suddenly got an effects suite that blows the Spider Valve's brains out the back of the cabinet. Oh yeah. And that pedal loads NAMM profiles. Suddenly, the price of admission for amazing guitar tone just fell off a cliff. Now, I'm not saying they sound exactly the same here. There's a slight tonal shift, sure, but holy fuck is it ever close. Like, really close. Close enough that if I didn't label the clips, you probably wouldn't know which was which. But bear in mind that the Veilton pedal runs a lossy version of NAMM profiles. You'll probably get even closer results if you used a Nano Cortex or something like that, but the idea here is to keep the cost as low as possible. And this setup costs $3,700 less than the original. Signal chain for this test was dead simple. It was a Spider Valve into an Engel 4x12 loaded with those new UK-made Celestion Vintage 30s that are just simply awesome. I mic'd that up with an SM57 and a Biodynamic M160 ribbon, and yes, I'm going to have more information on that mic in an upcoming episode. Now those went into the Neve Genesis Black and they were summed on the board. And oh yeah, I did the mix with nothing but free plugins using the techniques that I teach in the home studio cheat code. And I've got a big announcement on that one coming up next week. So do me a favor, stick around to the end of the episode and I'm going to show you how to download that preamp capture as well as those Vintage 30 impulses for absolutely free. Now let's see just how close we actually got. So we're just going to take a very quick look at what's going on here. In the red, we've got the Soldano, and in the green, we've got the Spider Valve. And it looks to be just a small shift going on, but we compare them back to back, we can see just how close they are. Looks like the Soldano's got a bit more going on than, say, the bottom end from below 120 hertz down all the way down to 80, but we're talking maybe 107 to, say, 106. Yeah, maybe 1 dB difference. Like, that's not gigantic at all. That's just turn your bass knob up maybe a little bit. And in the mid-range, we do get a little bit of separation here and there. It seems like there's a little more going on the Spider Valve from, say, 340 to about 400 hertz. But again, we're talking about maybe a decibel, if that, decibel and a half. Once again, Spider Valve's got a little bit more energy going on in the mids, but the Soldano seems to take the lead here, say between 775 and 1 kilohertz. And we don't see any major deviations here until we get into the extreme top. If we look at this right here, say from like 12 kilohertz on, there's a lot more top end energy going on with the Soldano. Whereas the Spider just kind of drops off. And that probably has a lot to do with the Veilton's capture system being a lossy system, so it's just not capable of producing frequencies that high, at least as accurately as the real thing can. That's not necessarily a bad thing when you consider it, though, because you're going to be rolling off a lot of stuff above 10 kilohertz on a guitar signal anyway, because you need to leave room for the cymbals and the top end on the vocal and that kind of thing. So it's not really important that we get it super accurate there. I'm more concerned with what's going on between, say, 100 hertz and 10 kilohertz, because that's what really counts. Now, if we zoom in here and we take a look at the red of the Soldano, it's nice and smooth. There's a little bit of wave action going on there, but it's nothing compared to what's going on with the Veilton going into the Spider Valve. This is just jaggedy like crazy, and I think this has something to do with how Neural Amp Modeler captures, and then Veilton uses that lossy system to be able to load that profile onto its pedal. It's not necessarily a deal breaker because the results are damn close to the original. And if you want something even more accurate, you could go with something like a Nano Cortex, but that's literally 5 times the price of the Veilton. Now, a word of warning, if you're gonna do this, you must dial the output of the Veilton to just before noon. Any hotter and you're gonna slam the input too hard. Any lower and it gets thin and lightless. It is a very narrow sweet spot, but it's not that hard to find. And for all those out there crying, but it's only 40 watts, let me remind you, volume is not about watts. It's about speaker sensitivity. And the Vintage 30 is rated at 100 dBs at 1 watt, which means, yes, it's loud as fuck, especially when you've got a 4x12. Now, the 100 watt head version of the Spider will give you more headroom for hitting that effects return, but if you're chasing killer tone on a budget, this setup absolutely delivers. We are living in a glorious moment for guitar tone because budget is no longer the gatekeeper. For less than $300, you can take some old ass bargain bin combo that's been collecting dust in your basement, gut its garbage preamp section, and feed its power tubes something actually worth listening to. And thanks to the tech we've got now, you can run a NAM profile of a legit high-end preamp through a $79 pedal straight into the tubes, and suddenly you've got something that sounds shockingly great. Now, does it sound 100% like the real thing? No. And if that bothers you, go spend $4,000 on a boutique amp and call it a day. But for the rest of us, those of us who actually have to work for a living, it's close enough that nobody with a functioning pair of ears would notice, especially once you're in a mix. It's gonna be good enough for your rehearsals, your local gigs, and even your record. And here's the best part. I'm giving you a head start for free. You can grab my Sol preamp capture, some killer impulse responses, and even my custom Stormblae amp, all in one download, no strings attached. But don't be a dumbass. The Stormblade's a full amp sim, not just a preamp, so don't try running it into a power section. It'll sound like a wet fart in a metal trash can. Trust me, I did it, so you don't have to. But the preamp capture though, that works like a fucking charm. So if you got one of those old Line 6 spider valve combos that everybody likes to laugh at, don't throw it out. And don't believe the gatekeeping hype. You can make that thing rip with the right knowledge and a little help from some modern tech. And if you find one for under $250, grab it, because in the right hands, that trash amp could smoke some of the overpriced boutique bullshit your tone snob buddy won't shut up about, but insists on running it through some peevy shitfields. The rules have changed. Adapt or stay broke, bitter and irrelevant.